talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. And man, first and foremost, before I get into today's show and all that we're talking about, it feels good to have taken a little week off. I had the Memorial Day break, which was amazing. I hope that you guys were able to take some time for yourselves and enjoy a longer weekend than normal. If you have to work, I'm sorry. I know some people, the holidays like this, they end up working more while others can take off. So whatever your situation is, I just hope that you're able to find some you time. I gotta say, it was much needed. I feel like, not to get into too deep because this episode's not really about me today, but I feel like a new person almost coming out of that. I feel like I needed some of that little extra time to just like decompress and process everything that's been this year and process all that I'm feeling and all that I've done and want to do and things of that nature. So it was just nice to kind of just take that time and have a really sort of extended, slow weekend, which was really good. So I appreciate y'all letting me have the week off and hope it didn't mess up your routine too much. I know I hate when my podcasts take the week off. It fucks me up. So I apologize if I did that to you and your routine. But we back, baby, and I feel good. And I'm really excited about bringing you today's show. My guest is an amazing filmmaker who goes by the name of Michelle Hernandez. And this is like very much so back to the roots of Life as a Gringo, which is why I'm particularly excited to share her story and this conversation, because I think it's just back to basics, right? Michelle is someone who is of indigenous descent. She's Latina, but she's also in indigenous descent. And she's somebody who made it a point to reconnect with her culture, specifically with her tribe, and make that very much a part of her life. And obviously, for many of you listening to this, or my own personal story that I've shared with you about sort of getting back in touch with my Latin culture, that's been a huge sort of part of my life and an evolution as a human being, my evolution as a human being, I should say. And, I think I love being able to get back to these conversations because it's just a reminder of sort of like how important and how incredible it is to sort of have that connection, right, to your community and your culture and something larger than yourself, and to be somebody who's fighting to sort of keep that culture alive for the next generation. And it's very much so what Michelle is doing with the stories that she tells in the films that she makes and the work that she does. So just great to kind of sit back and have a conversation with her and hear her story. But I think also for me personally, it was sort of a great reminder as to my own personal journey, how far I've come, and kind of, it's always nice to sometimes just get back to basics on the pod a little bit. I know we are always talking about so many different things and life in general. It's nice to sort of, I think, just slow down for a second and think about how far we've come and just the evolution of ourselves as a whole. And I think that's what this conversation kind of did for me. So I'm excited to share it with y'all. I'm not going to blab anymore. We're just getting into this conversation with Michelle Hernandez, and we'll do it as a part of our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. All right, my guest today is a documentary filmmaker, co-founder of the Sugar Bush Hill production company, Michelle Hernandez. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Thank you for having me today.
Of course. And I'm really excited for our conversation. It's been a long time coming. I was having technical difficulties last time that we were supposed to have this conversation, so I'm glad that we were able to get it back on track. And I'm personally really fascinated by this because you're somebody who is very much so doing a lot of work when it comes to indigenous cultures, right? And really making sure the representation is present out there. You have two documentaries that have been kind of making the rounds at film festivals, and really this has been your life's work. And as somebody from like the New York City area, I'm so ignorant to a lot of these sort of topics around indigenous culture and sort of the present issues that are faced and just sort of just everything in general. I feel like this is like one part of our culture, of our community, that I haven't had the pleasure of really getting to become well versed around. So I'm excited to have you on, and I'd kind of just love for you to maybe give us a bit of your background, be it your lineage, and then also kind of what you've been doing with your life's work as of, with this topic of making sure indigenous representation is very much, here and prevalent.
Yeah, so I am Latina as well as Native American from the States. I'm indigenous from the States. From my father, who's
Mm-hmm.
Wiyot, and also Latino, and then my mother, who is Mayan and Mexican.
Mm.
So I'm a mix of all sides. I
Sure.
call myself indigenous because, yeah, I am indigenous. And I'm from, both Central and United States mixed Native,
Sure.
as well as, Latina. But that's a little about myself. And kind of got into filmmaking because I didn't see the representation for us there.
Mm.
And so I wanted to kind of be that change and also join the other natives and Latinas who are changing this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you, if I'm not mistaken, you grew up in Lolita, California. That's where you're from, right? Which is Northern California. And it's very, I think when people picture California, we forget how big it is, right? And how much, sort of diversity there is within culture in California itself. Most people think of, a place like Los Angeles, or even if we're talking about Northern California, think of the Bay Area. But, there is also this whole other sort of area that I think is very much forgotten about, when you go beyond the Bay Area in Northern California, right, and the sort of Redwoods area, and where you grew up, and there is still, from my understanding, a lot of the indigenous community still being very much so a large part of those communities up north there. So I think for anybody not familiar, I mean, myself included, what is it like growing up in that area, that is on sacred grounds, right? And really means so much to the people that have been here long before the United States was even an idea.
Yeah, so I grew up on a small reservation, like you said, in Northern California. I always make a joke that it's a cul-de-sac, because reservations all over the United States, or I call them reses,
Yeah.
um, are kind of bigger. Like some are like whole cities, some occupy, yeah, borders. But we are a small little community built of like 700 tribal members. And then you can, like, if you ever go to Lolita, you can drive around the res and then you're done. But yeah, it was interesting because I was fortunate and privileged enough to grow within my community. There's a lot of us mixed natives or different types of natives that are urban natives living within the city. There's me who grew up on the res. When I was about 11, I moved. So
Mm.
I was living in the city and then moved to the reservation. And I have a different perspective, but I was very lucky to be able to grow and learn from my community. And we're also a little different in the sense that we were also revitalizing our culture and our traditions.
Mm.
We unfortunately weren't practicing for a while due to colonization. We also had a major genocide in 1860. There were also laws, if people don't know that, there were laws passed by the United States where it was illegal for us to practice our cultural traditions.
Mm.
I don't think that stopped us.
Sure.
And there's also boarding schools. So there's like a lot of history that prevented us from continuing our traditions. And so when I moved up there, I was really interested. I was really lucky to have a great grandmother who always made it known that I was Native. I've always known that my entire life.
Sure.
But growing up on the Reds, I was interested in what we did. I got involved with basket weaving. I got involved with our traditional practices. And it was a time that was amazing because I got to be part of that revitalization with my community. And so now I'm really excited to say that there are generations, including my siblings, who will never not known that we didn't practice. And so that, I mean, that's a win in itself, and that's
Sure.
exciting in itself. And so, yeah, I'm going to have, eventually have children. And so they'll grow up with this, not knowing that that was something we weren't doing for a while. But it's really cool because a lot of the communities, there's about 3 to 4 tribes within Humboldt and Delaware County that all are similar to each other. And so we've been lucky enough to, when we were doing that, to ask and seek for help, and they would help us. And I think my favorite line was when we finally did our last ceremony, the revitalizing the ceremonies. There's one that we were waiting on, and it's our world renewal ceremony where we make the world right again. Mm. We asked tribes, and we're like, okay, we're ready. And they said, it's about time. We've been waiting for you because we complete these ceremonies together. And so it's been really exciting to be able to be a part of that and to be able to grow up with my culture and traditions, because I think it helps with my identity of who I am as a person. And this is like a conversation I have all the time with people. I think a lot of Western civilized or cultures are always seeking that, like there's something missing within them. Sure. And I think being a person of color or, you know, an indigenous person, we have those, right? We cling on to those and we understand they make up who we are as a person. So I'm always telling people, figure it out. Go to your roots, see where you're from, their traditional practices. It's never too late. And so, yeah, if anyone takes anything away from this, is like trying to figure out who you are, is always going to your roots and figuring out where your ties are, because I think that really helps us as a society and as people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I relate on many different levels. I mean, it was illegal at one point. I'm Puerto Rican. It was illegal at one point to fly a Puerto Rican flag in the United States of America. So that idea of sort of the purposeful erasure of our culture, or the weaponization of our culture, or colonization as a whole, I definitely relate to that. But I think also for me, definitely on my journey of finding myself, I felt like I had lost my own connection to my Latin culture. And what has brought me a lot of fulfillment in my life is sort of going back and rediscovering a lot of that. I made a point, I constantly travel to Puerto Rico now, and I go back to where my dad lived, and and the area that he grew up in, and really just trying to ingratiate myself in the local culture there, and really seeing so much of myself and feeling so much at home there has been an incredible sort of spiritual journey for sure for me. And I guess my question for you, kind of getting leaping off of that idea, is you've obviously made a distinction that your culture was so important to sort of your way of life that you had to sort of go back and try and rediscover it and reinvigorate it, not only for yourself but for others as well. And I'd love to kind of dig a bit deeper beneath the surface of what you feel like you've gained personally that was missing before, now that you have gone about this path of really, not only rediscovering but almost reigniting, right, that tribe and that culture as well.
Yeah, I think I've gained a lot, I guess, in finding out who I am as a person and understanding. I come from a long line of resilient people that have gone through a lot, right? There's a lot that we've faced, I don't know, since colonization began. Sure. And so knowing the resilience of my people, including my mom's side and my dad's side, makes me realize that I can do a lot of things. And then a part of that is being a part of my ceremonies and my culture. I also, I was the first in 150 years to do a coming of age ceremony. And so those ceremonies are pretty tough. And being able to do that basically it's made me realize anything hard that comes in my life, if I can do those things and also where I come from, then this is pretty easy. I shouldn't be afraid of things.
And what is a coming of age ceremony, if you don't mind me asking? What does that sort of entail?
So I can't give too much detail, but it's basically when a young woman, what we call it, like moon, which is basically a period. Traditionally, when you got that, you became a woman. And so it's a transition from young girl to woman, and you do a whole ceremony. Some last for about 7 days, some last for 3 days. Mine lasted about 3 days. We did ceremony at night. And then it's kind of this belief that when you're in that transition, you're a spirit, because you're transitioning from a young girl into womanhood. And so there's a lot that goes into it. Where I'm from, if you ever go to Northern California, it's cold. So it's really cold at night to do my ceremony. Sure. But it made me realize that if I could do that, and like it was like I don't know, we call it fog rain, where it's like rainy. So
Uh-huh.
not only was it cold, it was like rainy. So like it was a tough time, but I told myself if I could do these things, and I also danced throughout the night. That's another part of it, is you dance
Mm.
throughout the night. So if I could do those things and go through that, then I could basically do anything that I wanted to. So it just kind of solidified that, because also I'm really lucky to have parents who have never told me I can't do something.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've gone into an art where a lot of parents are really weary of
Sure.
their children because it's hard. This industry is super hard.
Uh-huh.
But having them made me realize that when I asked about my ceremony, they said, "We'll figure it out and we'll make it happen."
Right.
So basically, I've had a major support not only from my parents but from my community. So basically, all these things that I've done, it's all because of where I'm from and the tribe that I'm from and the people who believe in me. So it's community, it's doing ceremony, it's just being we are.
Yeah.
Has all kind of influenced my life, and obviously the work that I do. But it's also made me want to reconnect more to my Latina side, like my
Uh-huh.
Mexican side, because that's not a part of who I am.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I know one side, I know one cultural side of myself, but I also want people to know that that's not my entire identity, that I'm made up of many parts. And that's what makes me, that's what makes me who I am. And that's, I think, learning who you are is really important.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting to me kind of on what you're talking about, kind of like this ceremony and this idea of like the tradition of somebody sort of becoming a woman or becoming a man, right? These sort of traditional ceremonies or these pivotal moments in somebody's life, these sort of coming of age moments. I think there's this idea oftentimes that because of technology and colonization, all these different things, it's almost like the it's almost as if there's nothing to learn from the past, right? There's no value in the past or in the more simple living, right? We're like technology and progression obsessed, and we sort of think that um, it's almost as if people like just didn't exist before we had the internet, almost, right? It almost feels that way sometimes, or even before colonization. There's this notion that like the Europeans basically taught the indigenous people how to be civilized and like live life almost, right? It's this weird notion that the world didn't exist before sort of this Eurocentric idea of the Western world almost, right? And um, I think there's also even just kind of this younger generation. There's a lot of topic of conversation around the idea that many people didn't sort of have their coming of age moment almost, right? That's why so many people feel sort of lost. Like my generation and younger is blessed that we didn't go, we didn't live through like a war where people got drafted and things like that, right? Where there wasn't these sort of extremes where you were sort of forced into a very difficult moment in time that maybe you weren't ready for, but you just had to be sort of adjust to, right? And that many people are feeling sort of lost, or that they haven't sort of fully matured or grown up or become the adult, and there's some sort of thing missing for them. It's almost like we never had our coming of age sort of moment. And I guess, I would love to speak to a bit of sort of these traditions that I feel like, and these ceremonies that I feel like many people would often sort of, I think the popular notion would sort of be to shrug it off as sort of um not important almost, right? Especially when we're again in this world that we sort of exist in. But I think there's so much lost value in sort of being one with earth and nature and a bit more of a simple living as well. So I'm curious kind of maybe how you find that balance living in today's world and even working in the entertainment industry, but also recognizing how much value there is to be gained from more of a traditional sort of idea of importance or living that you found from your indigenous side.
Yeah. Well, first, there's like something I want to touch upon that you said was like simple life. I think, like traditionally as Indigenous people, we always adapted. I
Yeah,
also think that we were very smart and we were very
sure.
like you said, colonization was like, oh, civilize them. But we were civilized. I mean, we're the ones who taught these white people how to bathe. They didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that I want to stray away from, because there's a stereotype that, right, we weren't just like society, we weren't civilized, we did simple things, but we were a very complicated society.
Right.
We had councils, or what we would consider councils. We had a government. We also had practices that kept us alive. We also took care of the earth. People don't consider it science because it's indigenous practices. I mean, now they are. I just had this conversation earlier. Now they're coming back to us and they're like, oh, maybe we should have listened to you. I'm like, no shit, Sherlock.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, it was simple.
Like,
and when I say simple, I mean simple in the sense of like not being glued to your phone and not overvaluing money, and like, you know what I mean, like the idea of like almost having a little bit more of a grounded version of what's like meaningful in life,
like being balanced. And I think that's the thing, right? Is like we were very balanced, and so that's something I try to remind myself, because like, technology has advanced. I think we're always trying to find that dopamine kick to get us like happy and stuff like that, and so it's easily found through the internet or social media or the phone. And I think for me, it's also understanding that I have traditional values that I want to incorporate with whatever I do. And I think that's what helps me keep balance. I mean, I'm not a perfect human. I'm always stressed out all the time because this industry is so stressful. But it's also reminding myself, why am I doing these art? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing filmmaking? It always comes down to, I want to inspire people. I want people to learn about who I am, right? We as artists usually pull from what we know. And so I want that to come through in my art and my work, so that I can inspire other people. I can educate other people. And so if I'm not doing that with my work, then why am I doing it? And if I'm not incorporating my values and my traditional work, then what's the point in doing these things? And I think that's what helps me kind of, I guess, stay like balanced, is remembering those things, remembering that I come from a strong line of people. I also come from a place that values me and values who I am. Even though sometimes I'm always stressed, I'm like, am I being valued? And I'm being valued by my community, and that's all that matters. That's what I tell myself. And so I guess that's how I incorporate things. I don't know if I answered the question. I feel like I'm talking in a circle.
No, you're good.
But yeah, I feel like that's what helps me, especially to survive this industry. This industry is so hard. It's really tough. But also, I think the support that I have, not only from my community, from my partner, from my friends, that they all want to see me succeed, and I want to see them succeed. And I know eventually it'll happen. I mean, I feel like I am succeeding in that I get to do this as a living. I get to be a filmmaker as a living. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that this was possible. And here I am getting to do that. And so I guess I appreciate that every day, because, one day this could be pulled away from me and I'd have to go back to a 9-to-5 job being like, I hate this.
Right. Yeah, I think what I think you kind of hit a little bit on there of what I was sort of getting at, the idea of tradition almost, right? And values. And I think when we talk about the idea of like having those deep cultural ties and participating in ceremonies like ones that you've described, that really does sort of ingrain a sense of tradition and certain values in your soul almost, right? And then you can sort of take on the world, but through the lens of somebody who has those sort of core things built inside of them, right? Especially when we talk about an industry like the one you and I both exist in, it's very easy to, if you don't have a solid foundation, to sort of just get swept away by the next shiny sort of object, right? And that's also sort of, expanding upon like the idea of a bit more simplicity in a simple life. Like, I subscribe to wanting to have a bit more of a simple life where I cut out the noise, basically, right? The sort of nonsense that has been taught to me from our modern society as like what is valuable, be it the material items, be it whatever thing brings you a certain social status, right? If I allowed myself to get swept up in prioritizing those things, I would deviate further and further away from what actually makes me happy at the end of the day, right? And I see it so much with coworkers or acquaintances or whatever it might be, where, you know, they're sort of allowing themselves to get swept up in the idea of celebrity or money or status or fame or whatever it might be, because there is no real grounding or attachment to, like, I feel like a core value system at the end of the day, right? And that's sort of, I think, missing from our modern society, you know, living in an extreme capitalistic society.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, even if we're going back to when we touch on colonization, right? The sort of overvaluing of something like gold or goods gave people the moral okay to commit some of the largest atrocities the world has ever seen, right? And that is because they lacked that sort of foundation, that core of what it meant to be a part of a community, what it meant to care for the earth, to care for each other, you know, as fellow human beings. And I think that's sort of where I look to a lot of things you're talking about. Is like, you know, that's sort of what we're missing, I think, in today's world, where we almost are too proud or too egotistical to sort of realize that maybe we're lacking something almost, right? That maybe people before us were also hitting on some really beautiful and sort of poignant ideas that we all could benefit from right now.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up capitalism, because I always think about that. And I think about, like, where did that stem from? Where did that start? And it
Mm-hmm.
started when colonization occurred. When colonization occurred, they weren't calling it capitalism. They weren't calling it colonization. They were just
Yeah.
like, we're here for goods to take resources. And then that
Right.
transitioned to taking more resources, or, you know, creating, like, the system that doesn't work for any of us. And so
Right.
I always tell myself, like, this society that we're in, especially in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
is not meant for us.
Yeah.
It definitely doesn't work for us. We shouldn't be working, I don't know, 10, 12-hour days. Our bodies aren't meant to do that. And so it's a
Right.
reminder that it's okay to take rest. Because, right, especially in filmmaking or any art, you always have to hustle, hustle, hustle to get
Sure.
that next job. And I'm just like, why? Like, what? Yes, I know I have to pay my bills, but, like, why can't I just show the skills that I have and the talent that I have to get that next gig? Like, why do I have to constantly take a job that pays me
Uh-huh.
$100 for a set, which is not, that is not okay. Just letting
Right.
people know that it's not okay to pay your crew that much. Like, I don't know. It's really hard, because I feel like capitalism creeps into filmmaking as well, or any, like, art
Yeah.
industry, where, like, you have these huge studios who are making these filmmakers be on a deadline instead of taking their time.
Mm-hmm.
And also, they don't understand what it means to make good art, any art. And I think any film, you know. And so they're always like, get it done now. You have to get it done on this timeline. Or why aren't you working fast enough? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, maybe because I haven't slept, or maybe I've been working
Right.
24 hours to do your VFX.
Uh-huh.
I think it's definitely, there needs to be a culture, like, switch within society. And, you know, we have a lot of the strikes that are happening within our society. And I think it's because we're waking up and saying, this is not fair.
Uh-huh.
It's not okay for you to treat us this way. And also, it's not okay for billionaires to be paid billions of dollars to sit on their ass and
Right.
not understand how the industry works, and then force us to work even harder for less pay.
Yeah.
And so these are things that like, I'm seeing it change. And so I'm really excited for, like, to see what's going to happen in the next 2 years in this industry. But I also realize, like, I can be part of that change. Other
Uh-huh.
filmmakers can be part of that change. We just had a conversation. We're gearing up to do a horror film in January. And so one thing that we talked about was, like, just making an 8-hour day
Yeah.
instead of making it 10, 12, because we want people to, like, we're traveling outside of, I currently live in Los Angeles, so we're
Uh-huh.
traveling up to Northern California to film it. But I want people to enjoy, you know, it's a break from filming, so they can get rest, not feel stressed out, and
Mm-hmm.
then enjoy being on set the next day. So it's these little micro changes. I think that smaller production companies and smaller filmmakers and indie filmmakers are going to change it. It's just going to take a while. But I feel it's going in a great direction where people are finally like, yeah, you need to stop this. We need to change how this industry works. Yeah, and stop trying to, like, I don't know, make us work harder for less pay, and then you get paid higher to not do much.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, I do. I mean, the optimist in me, I think it does see some signs of where it's not as cool to be a rich guy anymore, right? People aren't like jumping at that and bowing down to it as much anymore, right? They're asking for a little bit more substance, or they're not, blindly just following brands. It's like, oh, we're demanding you to actually have some sort of like story that we relate to in order for us to really like be truly, just supporting a brand, a company as a whole, or whatever it might be. So that definitely, I think, definitely, again, the optimist in me loves to see that kind of thing, and hopes that continues on, that sort of trend does continue on. But yeah, I mean, I think, the reality is when we talk about capitalism, it's the idea of how can we squeeze the most out of something to gain the most profit while putting the least amount into it, right? So how do we pay the least amount of money but get the most profit? How do we, basically take advantage of everybody at the bottom, and the people at the top are the ones reaping the benefits of it, and the people reaping the benefits of it are obviously those that are already incredibly successful, wealthy, and are hoarding at this point. They're not getting more money because it's what they need. They're doing it because it's almost a game at this point of how much more can I accumulate, right? And that is, from my understanding, when we talk about, tribal mentality and even just the idea of community, you judge a community based upon how healthy its members are, essentially, right? Like that is the prerequisite, it should be, at least, for the success or the failure of a particular community, is how well are the collective doing, right? Not one or two of them, but the collective in whole. Are they all being provided for, right, equally, essentially? And that is sort of the opposite of the mentality that we live in today, where it's basically just like every person for themselves, and the idea is like, hey, it's available to anybody else if they want it. You just got to figure out how to cheat the system and cheat the people, just like I am, right? And you can win just like me, rather than being like, hey, maybe I don't need the third, the fourth vacation house, and that means I could pay employees a little bit more money, right, to actually like have some pride in the work that they're doing, and not just be here because they have no choice if they want to put food on the table for their family, right? And I think that's sort of the sort of, I think, gross part of gross result of colonization, then becoming capitalism, then becoming extreme capitalism, which is where we're existing today. And this idea of community almost doesn't exist anymore, right? And this idea of, even we talk about America, it's almost unpatriotic, right? There was a point in time where companies would take pride in the fact that their employees were doing well, and like one person could be the breadwinner and support a family and have a house and have the car and all those things, where now they genuinely don't give a shit about what happens to anybody, as long as the shareholders are continuing to profit and the stock prices keep rising, and I think that's sort of the, I don't know, weird mindset that we have today, that I agree we sort of need to have a reset, and where we've gotten away, I think, from the human aspect, which I think is so much of what, like, when we talk about culture and community, and even like I go to places like Puerto Rico, and people who have so little are so friendly and giving at that point, right? They want to give. They are bringing you in and being overly friendly, and you go to somebody's house, they want to feed you, they want to do all these things, even if they don't have much themselves, right? And that, I think, is the importance of community that has been lost in I think, modern society, particularly in this country.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think there's something else that, like, there are people who think that, like, I guess get tricked by millionaires, right?
Yeah.
That they're like, oh, if you work hard enough and you save all this money, you'll become me. And that's not true.
Right.
Like, I think, like, people need to, like, I think it's this mindset, like the American dream has become like being the next millionaire. And I'm like,
Yeah.
there's no way. There's no
Yeah.
way that, like, we can achieve that. And so I think people are waking up in a sense of like, how do I make myself healthy and happy?
Right.
And what are, like, the goals that I want to achieve as a person? And I think, like, social media doesn't help with that either, because you have people who are constantly putting, like, all these things that I think, yeah, we should celebrate our wins, but like I think we're always trying to constantly make people think that we're happy all the time.
Right.
And we're not. I mean, we're human. Like I would be very concerned if you were happy all the time. I'd be like,
Sure.
all right, what's going on? Are you okay?
Mhm.
And it's this like realizing that like we're all, it's not being fake, it's that we're all trying to like survive. And we're all trying to show people like we're okay, it's okay. And I'm like, no,
Right.
it's not. Society is not okay. Like, you have all these fake, I don't know, these people who are just trying to make it seem like these, I guess, billionaires who don't care about us at this
Yeah.
point. They just want to make more money and make more money. And I do see that like with like our smaller communities where like we want to take care of each other, and I want
Hmm.
to figure out ways to go back to that. How do we go back to like caring about one another and like supporting each other and like making like community gardens or like I
Yeah.
don't know, when like a village like where we all take care of each other, and then finding ways to break those molds of like we don't like I don't know how to like tell millionaires we don't care about you, like at this point like we just want
Right.
you to like pay your taxes and we want you to like help communities because you could help so many, right? Like they could help
Yeah.
so many people. But I think somewhere along the lines when you make that money or you make reach that kind of level, it's like you forget that you're human and you're
Right.
like, well, what else can I do? And it's right, the next thing is make more money,
Yeah.
reach that next level of like millions. And it's just like really hard because they have so much money that could change the world and they
Yeah.
just don't want to do it. And it makes me so sad because I was like, oh, you can help so many people. You could pay for so many college tuitions. You could like not, I wouldn't say solve like poverty, but maybe you could find a way to make a dent in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think at that point I know that they don't care about us, and I think it's starting to people are starting to wake up like they don't care at all, and I don't think they ever will unless something happens to them, and then they wake up and be like, oh, maybe I should help people.
Yeah. Well, I think we've sort of like made these asinine goals of like, oh, I want to be a millionaire, but that's so surface level, right? It's like, well, why do you want to be a millionaire? And I think most people never answered that question, right? The goal and the um sort of achievement ends at just being a millionaire, right? With no real idea of like what you plan on
Yeah.
doing with it. And I think for so many people, when they do achieve that, because there's not any real substance to it, it's like, oh, well, this doesn't feel great. Let me become a multimillionaire now, right? And then a billionaire. And then, so it's like this never ending lack of fulfillment because you're sort of putting this value and you're idolizing the money at the end of the day and thinking that that is sort of the answer to it all, right? And I think a lot of other people are beginning to sort of realize, especially as we see, in the news about the dark side of like these celebrities' lifestyles that we didn't know about, or these billionaires, and we watch their lives falling apart, right? Their personal lives and all these things. It's like, well, was it really worth it then at the end of the day? I mean, this person, spent no time with their loved ones whatsoever. They have no relationship with their kids, their wife, their husband, their spouse, and they worked an ungodly amount of hours all the time for what? To be able to drive a Ferrari? Like, is it really worth it at the end of the day, right? And they're not actually doing anything that's leaving any real impact on this world whatsoever. So I think a lot of people are beginning to wisen up to that, and I think that's sort of, hopefully the cultural shift that begins to happen is asking a bit deeper in that layer. Like, do I really need the $1 million, right? Is it worth all that I have to sacrifice in order just to get this arbitrary number to be a part of a particular club, right? And and I think that is sort of a shift that I am enjoying seeing to a degree. And I think even, in the work that you're doing to kind of bring it full circle, I think the fact that there is interest in what you're doing and talking about this history and very much so a different way of lifestyle than the extreme sort of capitalism we've just been speaking about, I think showcases that people are kind of like knocking at the door and asking like, well, what else is there, right? What else is there out there for me that I can learn about and see about and things. So let's kind of get into, some of the work. I know you have two documentaries that have been kind of making their rounds at the film festivals. One is Work is Ceremony, and the other, I don't want to mispronounce the name. But I want you to kind of touch on each of them and sort of the story behind them, and I guess what inspired you to kind of say, hey, I want to go on this very difficult path of making a documentary because I'm so passionate about this particular story.
Yeah, well, so Work as Ceremony is actually a dance narrative short,
Uh-huh.
and then Total Out Reclaimed is the doc that's kind of or doing its film festival circuit right now.
Yeah,
So Work as Ceremony is a little different than what I normally do. I normally work on narrative shorts.
sure.
So when I got brought on board, it's part of the Bartow project, which was 4 films, 2 docs, an animation that I was lucky enough to co-direct the animation called I'm just blanking on my film's name. Things you know I cannot explain. I was like, I've been on this for 3 years. And then the dance narrative short, Work as Ceremony. And they're all essentially about my uncle Rick Bartow, who was a native Booyah artist. I didn't realize how prolific he was until I got on this project, right? It's funny when you have these family members in your life and then you learn more about them.
Right.
My uncle passed away a couple of years ago, but it's funny because I was like, oh, okay, he did a lot of cool things. And like,
Right.
I was like, it's just the guy that came to my house and hung out with us.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're all about his life and what he did. Work as Ceremony is about him and his partner, Julie was kind of the one who pushed him to do art full time as a living, but she was an artist in her own right and didn't really get like the accolades and the shining that she deserved. And so I feel like a lot of artists, especially when they're partnered up together, one of them shines out more than the other, and usually it's the man.
Right.
You know, who knows why? I mean, we do, but
Right.
essentially,
our culture.
so we wanted to pay respect to her and tell her story. I don't want to give the whole film away, but basically, it's their whole life together told through dance, and her artwork as a basket weaver, and then how she like kind of helped him in a way. It's a very different than what I normally do. But it was really fun to do because we got to bring all different kind of art forms together to make this film and collaborated with so many amazing people. Like I said, I'm the co-director with Sam. So that was interesting. And then Total Out Reclaimed.
Oh, I want to actually touch on Work as Ceremony because
Okay.
you made me think of something that I think is really interesting. Did it change your perspective at all about relationships, right? Because you're talking about the prolific sort of success that your uncle had, but the sort of unsung hero behind that was his partner, right? Who was pushing him and who even sacrificed her own art so he could sort of be elevated, I'd assume it in some sort of way. And so I'm curious if it had any sort of, impact in the way that you perceived relationships or artistry or anything in general with that. 'Cause I find that to be a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, it made me realize like how often this happens. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm really lucky enough to have a partner that like supports me. My partner is an artist himself, and
Uh-huh.
he's very talented in his own right. But it made me realize like not everyone's lucky enough to have it. And I'm not saying my uncle didn't support Julie. He
Sure.
loved her and supported her. Um, but I always wondered if I was born in a different time period, would I be as elevated as I am now? I'm not saying like I'm huge, but I feel like
Mhm.
the work that I'm doing is getting out there. And so I was like, if I was born, I don't know, a couple years later back then, would
Yeah.
it be the same? And also like, why don't people uplift their partners like that? I guess that's like, again, not speaking of my uncle, but other artists, I see this
Yeah.
happen a lot to women is like, why don't we uplift women like we do with men? I mean, now times are changing, and we're getting out there. I mean, not as much as I would hope for, right? Because
Sure.
this, again, industry, you fail once as a woman, then your career's over, and that
Right.
sucks.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I see it all the time. But I think it makes me realize, like, how do you build your relationship stronger? How do you support one another so that you both can be successful? I mean, I run a company with my partner as well. And
Right.
so it's interesting because we're both different in our styles of work and art. And sometimes I just like want to pull my hair because like I'm kind of a control freak when it comes to
Sure.
editing, and it's really bad. But I have to let it go because I realize like my partner is just as talented and we can find that happy medium. So I think it's like learning to my partner also happens to be my spouse or like my husband. So
Yeah.
it's like learning to like work with your spouse and how to do those things, and also be an artist in your own right, and making sure that like our voices aren't muted.
Right.
I think that's what's really interesting. But yeah, I definitely am privileged to have a partner that will wake up in the morning and say, I'm very proud of you every day.
Yeah.
And so like if I didn't have that, and if I had the wrong partner, I don't know if I would have gotten where I'm at,
Yeah.
to
Well,
have
I mean
that support.
that's what I was gonna touch on as well. I think even like it speaks to how important it is to sort of find the right partner that really does push you to go after what it is that you really do want, right? Because there are so many sort of stories of people who could have been, but gave up on themselves because they didn't have a support system, or even worse, allowed others around them to sort of beat them down to the point that they felt like what they wanted was impossible, right? And didn't actually elevate them in that way. And I always just find, I think, those dynamics to be so interesting, because I know for me personally, when I'm in a healthy relationship, I'm usually at my best at that point, right? I'm far more focused. I am far more disciplined, and having that support system to lean on in the inevitable sort of tough moments of the roller coaster ride that is being a creative. I think that it's incredibly invaluable. But again, I think it speaks to that the importance of who you surround yourself with, specifically the person that you choose to settle down with is the one you're going to be around the most, in your
Yeah.
life. And I think just having that understanding is so incredibly important. So that's a fascinating, I think, story in itself. And then your other doc, I want to make sure we touch on that as well, or the doc
Yeah.
itself, I should say.
That's still reclaimed. That is a doc about my tribe. We are the first in the United States to receive land back.
Mm,
And so I knew eventually, like, I would tell this story. Like, everyone made it very known in my community since, like, I was little and started filmmaking. They're like,
yeah,
eventually, you're going to tell the story about, like, our tribe. We don't know which one it is. And then we started work. I mean, people since the 70s, even past that, since like 1860 when we got our land taken away from us, or our island, we've been working towards getting it back. And so like
right.
I've always heard that from a community, like eventually you'll tell the story, it's gonna happen. I didn't think it'd be this soon, but here we
Yeah.
are. So basically it's kind of talks the story about like how our island was taken away from us, the progress of getting the island back. I think the real movement happened in the 70s, so that's about 50 years of
Mm,
trying to get our island back. Eventually we bought like a small parcel, I think like a couple acres of it, and
yeah.
that cost so much money. And then by 2019 we received most of the island back. And then the film also talks about the environmental impact we had on cleaning it up, and just like the struggle of getting it, but also the hope of knowing eventually we would get it all back. And it was
Mm,
all like the key person to this was my aunt Cheryl, who is like the main character in our doc, and talks
yeah.
about this, and like how far she's come, and like how much work it took, and the community supporting her. I think that's the thing, right? It comes down to community believing in this and saying, yeah, let's make it happen. And so yeah, that's probably one of my favorite projects I've done, not only because it's about my tribe, but it's also like really personal to me.
Hmm.
And it shows me what a small community can do. I mean, because Eureka is a tiny, Eureka, the city, and
Yeah.
then my tribe. We are like, we're not huge cities and we're not a huge tribe.
Right.
Yeah, we did this, right? We got our land
Right.
back, which when the day came that we finally got almost all of it back. We don't own a couple like acres because they're privately owned. There's homes on it.
Yeah.
But when we got the island back, like we heard from all over the world. Like it was on social media. It was crazy. Like
Mm,
all over the place. People I didn't even like I was friends with but didn't know were posting things. And I was like,
sure.
that's my tribe. That's my community.
Yeah.
So it gave hope. And now, since then there has been other like tribal communities who are getting their land back. So like I'm so excited to see that. And I know my tribe is working on creating like a way to like help other tribes work on getting land back. So like, I don't know. I really love the film we did. And I right now it's in the film festival circuit, but once it's done, we're gonna post it online. I know it's gonna go on a educational website as well. Because we
Mm,
did it through UC Davis. They gave us funding to do the project.
sure.
And so yeah, I don't know. I love I love our film, and it's been doing well. We just won like audience award a couple weeks
Wow.
ago from the Indie Film Festival. So yeah, and then I'm like trying my like partner and everyone's like, you should like talk about the things that are happening, and I'm just like, oh, but yeah, we won like best local film at Humboldt, so that was really cool. And that meant more because that's from home. That's like my
Sure.
community, Humboldt County, and I was like, oh wow, this is cool. Um,
Yeah.
and and yeah, it's funny because actually those two film festivals we kept getting denied.
Wow.
For like I think we've been denied 5 times. So like when
Wow.
we submitted to Humboldt Film Festival, we're like, well, if it doesn't get in, it doesn't get in. Like it's not, we're not gonna be
Th-
bummed about it. It's like
that
the
same project
realization.
got denied, or you had other projects get denied?
Uh, well, Tolwa didn't get denied, but all like Work of Ceremony,
Yeah.
Duke is my first film that I
Sure.
did. The animation played, but it wasn't like it was just through like we made a connection.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and then a bunch of the films that like my partner directed, like we had submitted almost every year. I think during the pandemic we might not have, but like they didn't want and I don't think it's because they're not. I think they're good. I think it's just hard to
Yeah.
program things. But yeah, we kind of both looked at each other with Humble and the Indie Film Festival, and we're like, this might be the last time we submit because they're expensive, right?
Sure.
They're like they cost money.
Yeah.
And so then the next thing I know, like we got submit like Humboldt wanted the film, which was exciting. And then I remember at Indie Film Festival, like my partner's from Indiana, so he's been trying since like he was little to get into this festival.
Yeah.
So when he got the email for that, he was like, "We got in," and I thought it was like a joke. I was like, "No
Yeah.
way!" So yeah, I mean, it just shows you how much persistence. Like I feel like everyone has that story where you're on the edge of like giving up, and
Hmm.
then something happens, and now we're like, we're winning like the local and the audience award, and that means a lot because that means that the audience really liked it, and that means like
Right.
my community liked it. So I'm just like, that's a win in itself. So
Yeah. No, that's so inspiring, because I think, it's easy, I think, especially you're getting turned down, to just make it mean something about yourself, right? Like, oh, I'm not good enough at this given task, or this project. I'm not a good filmmaker. That's why we keep getting denied. Me, I should go back to whatever else I was doing beforehand, right? And I think just it speaks to the idea that just sometimes it's not the right project or the right timing or whatever it might be, but a no isn't like this sort of um you know like just this reflection of you not being good at what you do. It just might mean right now is not the right time, and I think it speaks to that. So that's amazing. Congrats on all the success thus far with it. And I think the last thing I want to ask you is, obviously with this story in particular, it's so personal. It's the story of your tribe, right? Um and it's something that you sort of knew in your gut you would always end up telling this story at some point. But for you, what do you sort of what is the goal, or I think the grandiose hope that you have by putting something like this out there into the world? For you, what is it that you're hoping it does, for the people that end up seeing it?
yeah, well, for Total Reclaimed, I hope that it inspires people to give land back. I think that's out of anything, if like someone decides, oh, I have this parcel of land that I own, and they
Yeah.
figure out what tribe is from this area and they give it back, that's a win.
Mm.
The other thing is I've constantly told people that land back's not a bad word. People get really afraid of that word, and I'm like, when we talk about land back, I mean, since land back has started, like the movement, I feel like
Right.
we've always had land back as like since time immemorial, ever since colonization began. We're like, give us our
Sure.
land back. Um, I tell people it's not a bad word and it's not a scary word. It means that we don't believe in ownership of the land. We believe in taking care of this place, right? That we are connected to this place and that it's
Mm.
our responsibility to take care of it because the way that things are going, it's not leading to a good direction, right?
Right.
Because of capitalism, the
Uh-huh.
taking of resources. But I tell people just my little community because the island, if when people watch the doc, the island was so toxic that we weren't allowed to really go on it. And then
Mm.
eventually we cleaned it up. Like we were the first tribe to receive a huge EPA grant to get it cleaned up. And again, it's just a small piece of land, but now it's healthy and like clean. So I tell people we are proof that once you give land back, there are effects and we can reverse things. It can't be like perfect,
Mm.
but it's safe enough that the land is healthy again.
Right.
And so when we talk about these things, when we talk about giving back land, we're talking about allowing us um, allowing us to practice our cultural traditional practices, so that we can reverse things, so that we can have a healthy community, not only for us, but for the community that lives there, right? I think people get afraid. I was just telling someone this. People are afraid that we're gonna kick them out of their homes and be
Mm-hmm.
like, get out here, like what was happened to us, and we're like, we would never do that. Like, this is your home too. This is your, I think that's the thing. This is your community too. And it's your responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
because we are tired as indigenous people to have this all on our shoulders.
Sure.
You're here now. So like, help us so that there's a place for your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren. And that's all we want. We want people to like change their mindsets and realize that we're all in this together to like take care of it. And if we don't do that, then what is there left for us to give to the future?
Mm.
And so, yeah, when people watch this, I hope they take that back, that like, yeah, it's my responsibility to take care of this place. And yeah, if there's a rich guy there that has a bunch of money and wants to give it to tribes so we can buy more land, that's great too. I mean, that would be awesome. But yeah, that's what I want people to take from it, is that like, we're resilient and we're making movements and we're here to stay. Obviously, they've tried for hundreds and hundreds of years to get rid of us, but we're still here. I mean, I'm
Sure.
living proof. I'm sitting here making
Yeah.
movies about us.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I that's beautiful. I think it speaks to kind of all of us playing our part as well, right? Like, your talent is in filmmaking and storytelling, and through that you can hopefully inspire others to utilize their own gifts, right, that they have that can contribute to this entire movement as a whole, right? And I think that's such a beautiful thing when we all kind of are able to play our part and utilize what naturally our God-given gift is, and utilize it for the betterment of all of those around us, as a whole. So I think that's a beautiful thing, and definitely salute you for the work. Where can people check out anything on the films? I know you said Toulon Reclaimed is still in the film circuit, so it's not available on demand or anything like that yet, but anything you want to push people to check out?
Yeah. So most of our updates are on our social media. Sugarbush, I want to say underscore Hill underscore Productions.
Uh-huh.
We update like where the next film festival is at, or if we are releasing stuff online, we put it there. I also put it on my own social media, Michelle Her 89. I put a lot of our stuff there, and then our website, Sugarbush Hill Productions. Um, we have a lot of our films where you can watch Duke, which was like the first film, which is about Native boarding schools. It's a narrative short. Like I said, that's kind of my expertise. I've been
Sure.
venturing out a lot. And then you can also see other works that we've done, our next, like what projects are coming up. And so, yeah, those are the best places to hit us up and see like what we're doing, what our work is coming out, where we'll be playing next.
Beautiful. Michelle, thank you so much for hopping on here and sharing your story with me, and all the work that you're doing. I'm excited to see what else you end up cooking up with the production company and all the storytelling.
Thank you.
Man, big shout out to my guest this week, Michelle Hernandez, for hopping on the show. I love this on so many levels, and I'll save a bit of this for the conclusions too, but how beautiful is it that somebody is making a living doing something they love, telling stories that are important to them that will carry on and, enlighten generations to come. And I just think that's goals, man. That's just goals at the end of the day, right? And it's a beautiful thing when you can combine your passion and make it your purpose by, participating in something much larger than yourself. I just think there's something so beautiful about that. So big shout out to Michelle for hopping on the show. With that said, I want to touch base with y'all real quick. I know we haven't done an Ask a Gringo in a minute, it feels like. So I want to touch base, get your guys' take on this whole idea of culture and its importance in our lives and things of that nature. So we'll talk about that in our Ask a Gringo segment.
Ask a Gringo.
I have a question. All right, so that conversation, Michelle, we went a little bit long, which I have no complaints about whatsoever. But that means I'm going to keep the Ask a Gringo relatively short just for time's sake here. And really, I just sort of kept the question pretty general and just asked people their view of the importance of culture and tradition. Is it something they believe they have to carry on for generations? or how do you keep it alive, right? Just in general, your thoughts on your culture, the traditions that your family has, and our community as a whole. And just kind of left it general there. Again, at DJ Dramos on Instagram, you want to be a part of these conversations. And I'm just going to read a few ones real quick that we got here. At DJ Tony Tigre says, very important. I'm going to teach my kids to speak Spanish, go to Mexico, grow up like I did. And I absolutely love that. I'm right on the same page with you. Obviously, my kids might be teaching me Spanish probably, but I definitely want to take them to Puerto Rico and have them have that attachment and that pride. I think for me, even growing up, and I know I talk a lot about kind of like not feeling in touch with my culture, I still had a great deal of pride because my father is a very proud Puerto Rican man, right? He's like the mayor of proud Puerto Ricans, I would say. So he instilled a love for Puerto Rico in me. I think I probably, as I got a little bit older, I lost it a little bit, and not the pride, but maybe just the closeness to it. And also, I think as you get older, you just begin to really realize what that means to be ingratiated in your culture and things like that, and to be immersed in it is probably the better word. But definitely, I want to do the same for my kids and have them be proud of, where our ancestors come from, and be able to call Puerto Rico home, just like I feel like I'm able to now as an adult. At Jimmy Teets says language. And obviously, this one is a loaded one for me because my Spanish is, honestly, it's getting better. Even my 90-something-year-old grandfather has said it, and I communicate with his wife, who doesn't speak any English, and I go there and I'm holding it down. So I'm getting better for sure. I think as I've gotten older, it's more than just a pride thing now. I think for a while it was like I want to learn Spanish because I'm tired of being called a fake Puerto Rican, right? I think for me now, it's more so I've fallen in love with our language. I think there's something warm about when I hear it spoken. I love when I touch down in Puerto Rico and I get off the plane and walking through the airport and I'm hearing people speak Spanish, or when I go there and somebody automatically speaks Spanish to me, right? They assume that I'm Puerto Rican, that I speak Spanish, and there's a comfort there, and I feel a part of something. I can't really describe it, and I think there's something so beautiful about that. I love being able to participate in that. And even now, I think I mentioned this before, but like one of the kind of investments that I did, I own a U-Haul business, and when I'm kind of doing the day-to-day, there's like a decent Spanish population in the area that I have it, and I see the comfort that comes over people when they ask if I speak Spanish, and I do speak Spanish to them, right? And it's a beautiful thing to kind of be able to participate in that. And there's just sort of unspoken, I think, commonality that you have amongst strangers because you have the ability to communicate in your native tongue. I think there's something beautiful about that. So definitely, I 100% agree with language, and it's why I've made it a priority in my adult life to try and speak it as much as possible and to get better at it, as much as I possibly can at this point in my life. And last one here, at YouAin't_Tati says, through the food we cook and the special times and occasions we spend together to celebrate. And I love that as well. I think that actually scares me a little bit. Not the food thing. It scares. I'm like now making it about me, because I 100% love that. I love that I could tell my mom like this, and I want, when she asked me if I'm coming over there, like, what do you want me to cook, anything special? Like, yeah, I want like arroz con habichuela, right? I want, plátanos and I want all those things, right? And I think that there is so much comfort in the fact that I can go to my mom for that, right? For these traditional meals, and the fact that my grandmother, when she was alive, was cooking that and the pastelillos and everything like that, right? And I love that when we get together, we're having some of these like traditional Puerto Rican meals, and I love when I'm like running around in the city or somewhere, and like I'll purposely seek out a Spanish spot just to get that food because it's comfort food, and I think there is something beautiful about that. I was saying that scares me when I read that, because my sister, although I think God bless her, I think she was trying, but my sister is not the greatest cook of at least and Spanish food for sure, but she's trying. She's actually getting better, and I for sure don't know the first thing about cooking, Latin food. So that scares me a little bit, that it could die with our generation. I hope not. I know my niece and nephew, they absolutely love my mom's cooking like this, the Spanish food. So there's definitely going to be like a want for it, a demand for it. Hopefully, when my future wife decides to stop fucking around and comes and finds out, she will be somebody who can help keep that tradition alive for me. So putting that out there into the universe. But definitely, yeah, I think the traditions in that way of like the food and stuff and getting together and having like pernil, for the holidays and things like that being a special meal. I think is amazing, and that definitely like makes me feel at home and just like something special. So definitely things I want to carry on that I think are incredibly important to continue on for the next generation. Now with that said, let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, so I'm going to quickly just kind of summarize all we talked about. We got into a lot of stuff. I know it was a little bit of a longer conversation, but I just think in general, man, I think there is, I don't know, I talk about this a lot, and I read what different people, sort of write on the topic of like happiness and fulfillment. And a person that I really am a fan of is Carl Jung, who's a psychologist, and he talks about the idea that like humans, to really find happiness and fulfillment, they have to be a part of something bigger than just themselves. And I think that is what is so important about community and culture that I think we sort of lack in modern society, particularly in the United States. I can't really speak to other countries, and we have people listening from all over the place, so whatever applies to you. But I think in the U.S., because we're such a melting pot, and because I think we've lost a bit of that like patriotism, that united front, I think many people here are lacking in that place of community. And I think that's why culturally holding on to these things, as a Latino, as a Puerto Rican, and for Michelle as a native, and she even talks about her Latin side as well. But I think really trying to immerse yourself in those parts of yourself and be a part of the culture and surround yourself with the traditions and the people themselves still upholding that and be a part of that. I think that allows us to sort of fulfill that need of being a part of something larger than ourselves. And I think, for her, I think it's a reminder of just how blessed we are. Those of us who can say we've somehow managed to find a way to combine our interests and our talents and our gifts with our purpose as well, and be able to do that for a living. And obviously I'm speaking from a place of privilege, and I don't think it's, cheapens anybody else's experience if that hasn't been the case for you. I think we all have different roles to play, but I just think a lot of the conversation, even about, we were talking about money and greed and corporate greed and all these different things, I think a lot of the issues that plague us as a human society, and a lot of the selfishness and a lot of just the evil that you see on a regular basis, I think it is from a lot of people not having a sense of community and camaraderie with their fellow human beings. And I think the blessing that many of us have, that we can directly trace back our ancestry, because we're only, most of us just a few generations removed, if that even, we really have a place to sort of go back and see ourselves, right? I can literally hop on a plane and in 3.5, 4 hours be walking the same streets that my father grew up walking around, right? And I can go back to the house that he grew up in, and I've met his neighbors that were kids when he was a kid and now took over the house from their parents after their parents passed away, right? And I can interact with them and get a real feel for my lineage and my ancestry, and I can see my flag flying, and I can hear my language being spoken and the food being served that's been served for generations, and the history is right there for me to discover and to immerse myself in. I think that there's such a beautiful, just beautiful, I want to say the word feeling, but it just doesn't, I feel like it doesn't capture all that I'm trying to say, but there's just this feeling of being at home that I can't possibly describe. And there's a warmth and a comfort that just comes over me. And instantly I feel a part of something. And I think that's why it's so important to like keep those cultural ties and to pass them on, because I really do think, and I don't think I could say it with conviction, that prior to feeling completely immersed in my culture and sort of rediscovering my roots and really just being far more a part of Latin culture, prior to that, I think there was sort of an identity crisis happening. And I think now that part of me doesn't really exist anymore, you know, at least not as obvious, or the voice isn't as loud anymore. You know, I barely can hear him almost, that old version of me that didn't feel like he belonged. You know, it's almost like the gringo aesthetic that we started the show with, you know, whatever, 3 years ago, it like doesn't even fit me anymore. It's just an interesting sort of concept, you know. It's like I literally get off the plane, I hop in my rental car, I put on Bad Bunny, and I'm home. And I feel that way, and nobody could tell me otherwise, you know. And I think, and there's such a feeling of fulfillment and connection and, you know, happiness when I see good things happening for my people, anger that comes over me when I see things happening, bad things happening to my people, even if they're strangers. And I think that having that connection to a group of people that is, you know, larger than I'll ever be able to meet personally, I think really provides a sense of sort of just fulfillment and just, I think, grounding in general. And I think that that's sort of what's missing in modern society, very much so, is being able to have that commonality where we instantly feel at home with one another. And I think holding on to our culture, our traditions, understanding our ancestry, and immersing ourselves in that, I think really grounds us a bit, and I think helps fill some of the natural voids that we have as human beings. So I think that's what's so important about Michelle and all the work that she's doing. I think all of us participating in this Life as a Gringo movement together, the podcast, and everybody who's sort of gone off on their own journey as a result, I just think, you know, we are really doing a great service to our souls, but I think also the next generation of people, be it your children, just be it people you interact with. Like, we're really, I think, by finding that fulfillment and that wholeness within us, we're able to then sort of give that to someone else and provide them with this amazing gift of just feeling like they're a part of something because they are, you know. And I think that's what's so beautiful about just all these conversations around your identity and finding it and embracing it and slowing down and being a part of something. I think it's just amazing. And it's up to us to preserve the history, you know. We have this rich history of Latin culture from so many different cultures, so many different countries, I should say, and it's up to us to continue to maintain that history, to fight for it, to add to it, and to, you know, continue to celebrate its beauty and its richness at the end of the day. So many feels coming up in these types of conversations. So really nice to kind of get back to our roots, I feel like, a little bit with Life as a Gringo. So that's that. Again, big shout out to Michelle Hernandez for hopping on the show. And that's it, man. I'll see y'all on Thursday for our Thursday Trends episode. We got a lot to talk about. A lot happened last week while I was gone, so we're going to get into that. Until then, though, stay safe, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.